having conversations with each other. So I think these groups are good, like you'll be able to turn around and talk to each other here, and you'll be able to talk to each other here. But when you're at these tables here, you might want to send a couple of you behind you. Same here, put a couple people behind you there so that you can turn and talk to each other, because we're going to be doing a lot of time for you to have conversations with each other. So, back behind you. And I'm really happy to be here with you today and talk about leadership. And I've done a talk on Latino leadership for a few years for Leti, and this year I really wanted to come at it a little bit differently. I also want to recognize Cynthia for doing our translation. I really appreciate it. So Dr. Sanchez gave you some data about the growing population of Latinos in America. Just a little bit of review on that. This chart shows a 20-year change in, a 10-year change in population growth in the United States. And Latinos are the very top bar, the biggest population growth in that sector. All of the non-white populations are growing, and the white population is shrinking. That's been over the last 10 years. And this is the same idea, but it's only looking at those that are 18 years old and younger. So you have the same trend, except 2 or more race population is the biggest, is on top in that population group. So this is one reason why paying attention to Latino leadership is so important, these changing demographics. Another reason why it's really important is that almost half of the population has experienced discrimination in their workplace. And almost all of the workplaces, almost 80% of the workplaces in the United States, leadership is predominantly white. So bringing people in who can understand what discrimination looks like and make different choices about the kind of culture they're trying to create is really important. For those people seeking employment, 67% say being in a diverse workplace is really important to them. And companies with higher than average diversity are more innovative, and they tend to outperform in terms of revenue other organizations. So Latinos are sought after because you can contribute to that innovation, because you can understand the growing marketplaces. Also sought after in institutions like higher ed or healthcare because of that multicultural knowledge that's going to let you build relationships in communities and understand the needs of the Latino communities. So you're really sitting at a really important time for you to be engaged in joining leadership positions. And leadership, I'm talking about all levels of leadership. So any place where you get to make decisions or have input on decisions that impact your community, that's a leadership position. And it's not easy. It's not easy to step into these organizations that are predominantly white and they're led by predominantly white people. And I put a quote up here by W.B. Du Bois, who was an African-American scholar at the turn of the century, first graduate from Harvard Business School, first black graduate from Harvard Business School. And he talked about this experience of being the only person of color in these rooms of white power. And he said you have to step into those spaces with this, what he called double consciousness. Double consciousness. So this idea that you end up kind of policing yourself. What do I have to look like? How do I need to talk? How do I need to interact in order to be accepted in these spaces? And we know from research that people of color stepping into these and criticized. They get pushback, you know, that Latinos speaking Spanish in classrooms or in organizations that are predominantly English speaking, the white people around them get very uncomfortable when they're hearing Spanish and they don't understand what's going on. So that's an extra burden on you. It's what makes you powerful because you can see the world in two ways. It's also what makes you a target in those spaces. So being aware of both of those things. So here's your first discussion question. Turn to your small group and talk about in what ways do you have to code switch or adjust for the comfort of people, comfort of white people in predominantly white institutions. There were some great questions as I walked around the room. Questions about even like what does code switch mean? And then I heard many of you giving good examples. Does anyone want to shout out an example of code switching for the comfort of white people in predominantly white institutions? Anyone have an example you did there? Yeah,
being too loud, you have to code switch up the level.
bring the tone down. Maybe you're laughing too much. Other examples. Go ahead.
I would say like body language between the two different cultures.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so you become aware and maybe stop using some of the body language that you might normally in your family or in your community.
Closeness.
Yes.
For myself, working in environments when I've been working in corporations, and then you start adapting the way you speak around, the way you are looking. So it's very proof scientifically that you spend more than 8 hours or 4 hours a day with some people, you're going to start talking the same way that they're taught, saying the same words that they're taught, and you're going to kind of copy that behavior. And sometimes you don't do it on purpose. It's just natural that you start watching what everybody's doing, and you start doing it too as well, and speaking like them, and start like, and it's learning process too, but you start adapting to that environment so easily. And sometimes it's going to keep you away than you are.
Yeah.
You're going to start behaving different way, like, oh, it's because of where we do this, so we talk this way, or we come home with a new word, or new behavior, and a way to joke around. So that's very particular that we are like very easy as a human to copy behaviors like that.
People around us. Yeah. And I think, you know, we want to pay a special attention to when we feel like it's repressing who we really are, like we can't bring ourselves into these spaces fully because we feel like we have to kind of fit into spaces that weren't designed for us.
One other one that our group shared is the time. I remember like, well, we have a habit or, como Mexicano, Latino, like, okay, llegamos tarde, like we get here late. And I even had like my principal, mi directora, say, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late.
You're already late. Yeah.
And if you're late, it's unacceptable.
Yeah, it's already.
After 10 years.
Yeah. That's great examples. So I want to shift a little bit and thinking about how this ability to see institutions from a different perspective can be a great tool for you in thinking about how you can engage in leadership to address social justice issues and inequality. And so first I want to just talk about what is inequality. Right? Inequality is different amounts of something valuable. It could be income or wealth, it could be prestige, education, health. Inequality can exist in a lot of different areas. And we know in the United States, inequality by race is persistent and ongoing because of racial law and policy, racist law and policy. So here's just one example. This chart down here is wealth in the United States. And it's talking about that we have the highest inequality in income and wealth among the 7 most developed nations. And so the top 1% of our population holds 37% of our wealth, the next 9% have 39% of the wealth. So that's nearly 80% of the wealth held by the top 10% of the population. This is normalized in our country, but it's not normal in the world. Here's another look at wealth held by Latinos or Hispanic people. And so in 2021, Latino households had $50,000 in wealth. So wealth, all the assets you own, your house, your car, everything minus what you owe on those things. So about $50,000 in a Latino household, $250,000 in white households. And these graphs are the same thing once again. This shows the change from '89 to 2019. Everybody's wealth increased, but look at the difference in the size of the bars here. So huge disparities, huge inequality in wealth. And one of the biggest reasons is because home ownership is one of the main ways we accrue wealth in the United States. The national home ownership rate is 66% for whites, it's 75%. For Latinos, it's about 50%. So a huge difference in who gets to buy a home. And when you have a home, you accumulate wealth, you can pass something on to your children. But very few Latino households actually are able to inherit wealth, pass wealth down to their children. So white households inherited over 6 times the amount inherited by Latino households. So inequality in terms of wealth, I want to just point out 2 others. In terms of education, we can look at inequality in any sector. So in terms of education, these are high school students who go directly to college. So this has actually improved dramatically over the last 20 years. All groups are going to college immediately, 68%, whites at 70%, Hispanics at 63%. So that's closing, that gap is closing. And look at Asian and Pacific Islanders. Wow. This is college completion, the percent of the population that's completed college. So nationally, 35% for everyone. And whites are right about 35%. Asians at 56%. And Hispanics at 18%. So, table conversation. Why do you think these inequalities exist? I'm going to pull us back together again, and I'm going to see if one of these tables over here wants to tell us what they came up with. Yes, go ahead.
So we were talking that like specifically Latino men are less likely to go to college because they don't feel like they have that support where they can ask for help. And like a lot of our family dynamics can be so hard on them. Like they grow up and they're like, oh, like you have to go to work. Like you need to help your family out.
You have to provide.
Yeah, you have to provide.
Yes.
Instead of being like, oh, you know, like you should like go to school, like get your education. Not everybody gets that support.
That's a great example. Yeah. What else? Yeah, go ahead.
I had mentioned that sometimes us Latinos don't finish education in terms of like we go back to what our parents work for in terms of like agriculture or like construction. As someone who worked in agriculture for about 5 years, it's tough, and I see why like the parents push like get your education, get a better job, because once you're here, you're never gonna go out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Good example. Anyone else?
Yeah, our group is talking about misinformation. Our families come as immigrants and they have to go full time, and sometimes we don't know where to go to find resources. And we think it's so expensive to send kids to get a better education, but word that we able to study, but it's many resources. So
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is difficult. It's many dynamics, and each family is
Absolutely.
a lot of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And also it is, I believe it is our culture, like our parents grow up in different ways, they don't know the resources. Most of the time it's language barriers, because we are afraid to go and ask for help. We don't know where to go. Some people, they don't guide us
Yeah.
in the right way, because they know that we don't know, and maybe they don't want us to go and ask for those helps or
Yeah.
resources.
Yeah,
So it's kind of like all between.
yeah, a lot of different things.
Yes.
Yeah,
But each thing has something to see with all the solutions.
it all contributes, yeah,
Yes.
to creating a bigger problem. Absolutely.
Systems, like the systems, they were created for us, they were created for other populations, and then the other thing, when we come to a new country, we don't have the connections, and we don't know the system, how to navigate it, so it's really difficult because a lot of people need unique connections in our country. We have that support, but here we don't.
Perfect. That's what I'm gonna talk about next, our systems, so, let's go there. And I just think it's really important as you step into leadership and decision-making positions, that you're not just thinking, that you think about kind of individual interactions, how does this look for me? But you're also thinking about the bigger picture, systems that are in place that keep inequality in place. So this is a model that was developed by the state of Washington. It's their logic model for eliminating poverty. And so over here we have poverty or any kind of inequality. And according to this model, if you are going to have a different outcome, if you're going to improve a situation, reduce inequality, you have to pay attention to all of these things, and that will change the kinds of policies or budgets that get implemented to impact that inequality. So all of those things, starting from the top corner, history and truth is a failure to recognize and address structural racism, trauma, and discrimination. If you don't come into decision-making with that history in mind, you're not going to be able to change the outcome because you're not addressing a root cause of racism in our structures. So I think that's pretty amazing that the state of Washington adopted this as their logic model for how they're going to try to make decisions about changing inequality. But I really encourage you to use a tool like this when you're thinking about problems that you're trying to solve. And we don't have very much time, so I can't walk you through all of the pieces of the model, but I want to just touch on a few. And that first one is that history. Second one, who's in power. The third one, the values and beliefs of those people who are sitting in power. And the last one is the narrative about how they're going to try to address inequality. So I just want to talk about history and truth. Another way to think about this is what part of inequality is in the control of the person playing the game, and what part is the system or the way the game is structured. So, thinking about systems is kind of confusing. Think about the player and the game. You think about a great basketball player, or think about why are basketball players tall, right? Because the way the game is structured, right? You need people who benefit when they are tall and can reach the basket, right? Same kind of idea when we think about the systems that were created in the United States. They were designed to benefit a white nation, right? That was the original vision of the United States of America, a white nationalist Christian nation. And so everyone else was pushed out to make that possible. The same thing happens, so this last one was kind of looking at what's the player and what's the game in terms of, well, the player, their effort, their education, maybe that's in their control. But the game is kind of rigged by what jobs are available, the job structure, home ownership we talked about, and inheritance. I mean, it's hard to overcome those kinds of systems that are in place. Education, your attendance effort might be within your control as the player. But the way schools are funded is completely tied to wealth and property values. So people who have wealth go to better schools, have better resources in their schools. It's very hard for an individual player to overcome the way schools are structured, that system. And then if we had a quarter together, we'd talk about the history of all these systems and all the laws and decisions that were made that are clearly racist and are clearly trying to keep certain people from having advantage. But when you look at this, like education, employment, housing, health, each of those is a system. And within each of those systems, there's a history. And those histories created laws and ways of doing business or kind of what was considered normal that kept some people out. So just in terms of education, into the 1900s, their schools were segregated. There were Mexican schools. Even after racial segregation was abolished in 1954, instruction was English only. Schools were denied funds if their students were undocumented, so only students who could produce papers received funding. That continued until 1974-80 with Plyer versus Doe. The way zoning happens and the way property taxes drive school resources, producing real inequality in our schools. So that's just one example. And every single one of these systems has similar examples that I don't have time to talk about. But one of the things that in this model that happens, because it benefits those people who are in power, is that they develop stories, narratives, stereotypes that blame the individual, the player, for the problem existing. So like, what's wrong with those Latinos or Hispanics? They're not getting college degrees, right? Don't their families care about education? You know, why isn't it a priority, right? It makes it an individual problem instead of looking at the systems that are creating the problem. So I want to give you a little bit of time to discuss wealth or education or, an inequality that you choose. What do you think of when you think of what's in the player's control and what are a part of the system or the game that's producing that inequality? I'm wondering if it was easier for you to generate ideas about the game or about the individual who are kind of equal. What was the conversation like?
It's kind of hard because everybody expressed a little bit, but I was trying to say something is about, you put examples about the system, which is, that's the game, and the player is us. So honestly, the game is for people that know who is. So that's going to be hard to navigate, get well in education because we don't know the system. We don't know how to access to programs that maybe the government already have there to be able to buy a house and they're going to keep you wealthy. Another thing is the education, like you mentioned, why our kids are not able to get the same benefits because based on the wealthy, we don't own a house.
Yeah.
So that's going to be more struggle for our kids to navigate and get what they need for the education. So that's how I see it.
Yeah.
So basically, it's not for us. The system is not for us. Learn to navigate the system is not easy either.
Yeah.
Because not everybody is willing to let you know what to do. So that's another barrier, right?
Because the systems are set up to continue to hold power.
Yes.
understanding the world in this way, and you're thinking about what decisions can we make to change systems that opens the door for future populations. Go ahead.
I think funding is a huge part of the inequality in education. As I was mentioning to my peers, when I went to high school in California, and I went to a predominantly Hispanic high school, and you would get military recruiters coming to your school and encouraging you to join while teasing you with, free education, homes, and, whatever else they can entice you with.
Yeah.
Versus, other high schools where, I've noticed my little brother that goes to high school here, the amount of classes, extracurriculars that they have, the difference is extensive. And that goes to show, the funding that they have. USC is notorious for legacy admissions and just students who've been accepted simply because their parents have paid for it.
Yeah.
So.
Such an important example that legacy admissions, if you're not familiar with that, many of the most exclusive universities in the United States let the children in of graduates. They get a special exemption to enter without competing in the same way. So it's a way, power and privilege gets replicated across generations. So, someday when you're in a seat where you could give input into what an application process should be like, that's something you could call out and say, why do we do that? What if we changed it? How would that change who has access?
I want to say that acceptance school for people with money starts in kindergarten. I know a couple of families that they've been waiting to put their child at kindergarten, and they're waiting in line because predominantly Asian community
Yeah.
there, so it starts always.
And their kids are gonna come into kindergarten already with so many skills and be so much further ahead. Yeah. Any other comments anyone wants to share? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about there's not much that the player can control on their own. Even if you can say like your ambition and like your willpower, that's not even something that's, ingrained necessarily, because it depends on your upbringing, what the values that your parents put in you, and all those things. And it seems like we have a culture in the US of if you work hard, you can make it no matter who you are, no matter where you come from. But it's not a guarantee. So the only thing that the player can really control is how much they can do with what they're given.
Yeah, again, think who benefits from telling that story. Oh, it's an even playing field. All you have to do is work hard and pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. We like to tell that story in America, but people in power, then they're off the hook, right? They don't have to feel guilty about any privilege that they've had because they believe this story. But we know that it's not true. It isn't a level playing field, and we don't all have access in the same way. I always think about, this idea of, we do an admission based on merit, and then merit looks like, did you get to do extra things in the summer like travel abroad, or join a club, or play a select sport? And you go, well, all of those things take money and investment, and merit gets defined by those in power who can pay for merit, which isn't really meritable already. Thank you. Yeah, good conversation. Okay, so power and influence. Who's sitting in the seats of power? That's the next thing we want to pay attention to. And I just wanted to share a couple of slides. This is the percent of the population, people of color, who make less than $15 an hour. So it's, close to 40%. This is the U.S. labor force overall. Oh, sorry, other races here. And the top one, the blue, is the percent of Black and Latinos that are holding leadership positions in the Fortune 500 biggest businesses in the United States. So still have a long way to go to be taking over those seats. You know what this is? It's Congress, yeah. There's the Senate, the 100 members of Senate, and the 434 members of the House. the lived experience to know what the issues that we're facing. Although this is dramatically better than it was 10 years ago, especially in the house. That graph is just about age, whereas also not only is it not diverse, it's also a much older population. So the blue bars are baby boomers, the dark blue baby boomers, and silent generation. So that's who's deciding what kind of systems we should live in. So this is what I want you to think about as you step into leadership roles, is this idea of how can you invest to change the systems. And for the longest time, we talked about the quality. So think about the baseball game that's out there, that's opportunity. And we want everybody to be able to see the game. For a long time, we said, well, we'll do that by giving everyone the same thing, quality, right? And what's the result here?
And it wasn't equal.
Yeah, that you didn't provide that opportunity at all here, and just a little bit there. This idea of equity means investing differently to change the results. So we give people different amounts of resources and supports to get them access to the opportunity. This little one is just, what does the United States look like today, right? With this huge inequalities. And working for a more just society or liberation. So can we remove those systems? Can we change them so that more people have full opportunity?
I like the last one.
Yeah. And I think I'm out of time. Thank you for having me today.